Commander Lee Jun stood in front of the main control screen on the bridge of UES Resilience and watched the stars move past them in slow patterns. His ship was the first human vessel to travel this far beyond the Kepler belt, and every day brought new discoveries. The crew of 47 people had been traveling for 8 months now, and they were all getting excited about what they might find in the empty space between star systems. Dr. Kim Hana sat at her research station and typed notes into her computer about human survival patterns. She had been studying how humans react when things go wrong and had found some interesting things. Humans never seemed to give up even when the situation looked impossible. They would keep trying different solutions until something worked or they died trying. Other species they had met before always calculated the odds first and gave up when the numbers looked bad. Humans just kept going. Pilot Park Kyung was in the navigation room checking the flight path for the 100th time that day. He was the kind of person who double-checked everything because he knew that one small mistake in deep space could kill everyone on the ship. His personal logs were full of stories about times when he had to fly through dangerous situations that the computer said were impossible to survive. But he always found a way through by trusting his instincts instead of just following what the machines told him. Engineer Choi Dae was crawling through the maintenance tunnels beneath the main deck and cursing at a broken power relay that should have been easy to fix. The manual said to replace the whole unit, but they were too far from Earth to get replacement parts. So he was doing what humans always did when the proper solution was not available. He was making something work that should not work by using spare parts and creative thinking. His technical logs were full of repairs that other species would consider impossible. Communications Officer Yoon Mira was sitting at her station and preparing to send the weekly data burst back to Earth. The quantum communicator was acting strange lately, and she had been having trouble getting a clear signal. The device used quantum entanglement to send messages across impossible distances, but it needed very precise calibration to work properly. She had been adjusting the settings all morning and was finally ready to transmit. The data package contained everything the crew had learned in the past week. Dr. Kim Hana's research on human psychology was in there, along with Pilot Park Kyung's navigation logs and Engineer Choi Dae's technical reports. There were also personal messages from crew members to their families back on Earth and scientific data about the space they were exploring. Yoon Mira started the transmission sequence and watched the quantum field indicators on her screen. Everything looked normal at first, but then something went wrong. The quantum field started fluctuating in ways she had never seen before. The communicator was supposed to send the signal on one specific frequency that connected directly to Earth, but instead it was broadcasting on multiple frequencies at the same time. She tried to stop the transmission, but the communicator would not respond to her commands. The device was stuck in transmission mode and was sending their data package out in all directions across 17 different alien communication frequencies that humans had detected but never used before. The signal was getting scrambled and mixed up as it bounced between the different quantum channels. Engineer Choi Dae came running onto the bridge when he heard the emergency alarm. He looked at Yoon Mira's displays and immediately knew they had a serious problem. The quantum communicator was burning out its primary circuits and would probably explode if they could not shut it down soon. He started pulling access panels off the communication console and digging into the wiring with his tools. Commander Lee Jun watched his engineer work and knew that this was exactly the kind of situation that separated humans from other species. Most aliens would have followed the emergency procedures and ejected the entire communication system into space to prevent an explosion. But Choi Dae was not giving up that easily. He was going to fix the unfixable because that was what humans did. Dr. Kim Hana was recording everything that happened because she knew this would be another perfect example for her research. Here was Engineer Choi Dae refusing to accept that the communicator was broken beyond repair. He was trying solutions that the technical manual said would not work. Other species would have calculated the probability of success and decided it was too low to attempt. But humans did not think that way. Pilot Park Kyung left his navigation station to help with the emergency. He had no training in quantum communication systems, but he knew how to follow instructions and hold tools. This was another human trait that Dr. Kim Hana had noticed in her research. When one human was in trouble, the others would help even if they did not know what they were doing. They would figure it out as they went along. The communicator kept broadcasting the scrambled data package across alien frequencies for 6 hours before engineer Choi Dae finally got it under control. He had to rewire half the system and use parts from 3 different backup devices, but he managed to save the equipment. The transmission had already been sent, though, and there was no way to recall it. Medical Officer Bae Sol checked the quantum radiation levels and declared the bridge safe for normal operations. The communicator was working again, but it would need major repairs before they could send another message to Earth. Engineer Choi Dae said he could fix it properly if they gave him a few days and some help from the other technical crew members. Communications. Officer Yoon Mira analyzed what had been transmitted during the malfunction. The data package had been broken apart and scattered across 17 different alien communication channels. Each channel had received random pieces of information that probably made no sense when viewed separately. Dr. Kim Hana's research notes about human survival instincts had been mixed with Pilot Park Kyung's personal logs about flying through impossible situations and Engineer Choi Dae's technical reports about fixing broken equipment. Commander Lee, June decided to continue the mission as planned, while Engineer Choi Dae worked on repairing the communicator. They were still exploring new space and gathering important scientific data. The malfunction had been embarrassing, but it was not going to stop them from completing their mission. This was exactly the kind of thinking that Dr. Kim Hana was studying in her research about human persistence. Dr. Kim Hana spent the next few days analyzing what had happened and adding it to her research files. The crew had faced an emergency situation that could have destroyed their only way to communicate with Earth. Instead of giving up, they had worked together to find a solution that should not have been possible according to the technical specifications. Other species would have followed the safety protocols and sacrificed the equipment to prevent greater damage. But humans always tried to save everything they could. They refused to accept that anything was truly unfixable or that any situation was completely hopeless. Dr. Kim Hana knew that this mentality had helped humans survive and thrive in situations that would have destroyed other species. She just did not know yet that their accidental transmission had already reached civilizations that had forgotten what hope felt like. The UES resilience continued deeper into unexplored space, while far away, alien receivers were trying to decode the strange transmission they had received from an unknown species that seemed to possess impossible determination. The great scientist Morthak the Learned sat in his laboratory on the Veltar homeworld and stared at the strange transmission that had arrived 3 days ago. His 4 arms moved across multiple control surfaces as he tried to decode the scrambled data that had come from an unknown species. The transmission had been detected on 17 different communication frequencies simultaneously, which should have been impossible according to Veltar physics. Morthak had been studying alien communications for 60 standard years and had never encountered anything like this signal. The data seemed to contain technical information mixed with personal records and scientific research, but it was all jumbled together in ways that made no logical sense. What troubled him most was that the content seemed to describe a species that could succeed in situations where mathematics clearly indicated failure was the only possible outcome. His research assistant, Kyle Andra, brought him another analysis report that only added to the mystery. The species that had sent this transmission appeared to have individuals who would attempt repairs on equipment that their own technical manuals declared unrepairable. They would fly spacecraft through hazardous areas that their navigation computers calculated as certain death. Most strange of all, they seemed to do these impossible things regularly and expect to survive. Morthak activated his communication link and contacted General Kexandra, who commanded the Veltar military forces. The general had been fighting the century-long war against 6 other alien species, and her forces were close to complete defeat. Her soldiers had lost all hope of victory and were only fighting now because they did not know how else to die with honor. Perhaps this strange transmission would interest her tired mind. General Kexandra arrived at the laboratory within 1 standard hour and listened to Morthak explain what he had found in the alien signal. She was a veteran warrior who had seen her civilization slowly dying for decades as resources ran out and population numbers dropped. Her tactical computers had calculated their defeat probability at 99.7% and recommended surrender to minimize casualties. But as she listened to the decoded fragments of the human transmission, something stirred in her consciousness that she had not felt in many years. The aliens seemed to have recorded a flight log where one of their pilots manually navigated through an asteroid field with failing navigation systems. According to the data, the pilot had ignored computer warnings that declared survival impossible and had successfully guided his ship to safety, using only visual references and intuition. Kexandra asked Morthak to replay the section about the pilot again and again. Her own tactical training told her that what the alien pilot had accomplished was mathematically impossible. The probability calculations were clear, and there was no logical explanation for how anyone could survive such a situation. Yet the alien had not only survived, but had treated the experience as routine enough to record in a personal log rather than an emergency report. The general requested copies of all the decoded data and returned to her military headquarters with her mind spinning with new possibilities. For the first time in decades, she began to wonder if there might be factors in warfare that her computers could not calculate. Perhaps these unknown aliens possessed some kind of ability that allowed them to transcend normal physical limitations. Meanwhile, Communications Officer Yoon Mira on the UES Resilience was detecting strange response signals from deep space. At first, she thought the readings were just background radiation or equipment noise, but the patterns were too regular to be natural phenomena. Someone or something was responding to their accidental transmission, and the responses were getting stronger each day. Dr. Shin Woo, the ship's xenobiologist, was called to examine the response signals and immediately recognized them as artificial communications. The mathematical structure indicated intelligence, but the content was unlike anything in the human databases of known alien languages. He worked with Yoon Mira to clean up the signals and discovered that they were being transmitted on the same 17 frequencies that had carried their accidental broadcast. The response signals were coming from multiple sources scattered across a vast region of space. Dr. Shin Woo estimated that at least 40 different transmission points were sending messages toward Earth. The content appeared to be highly repetitive, with the same mathematical patterns being broadcast over and over again. It reminded him of prayer chants or religious ceremonies that used repetition to create psychological effects. Commander Lee Jun called a meeting of his senior staff to discuss the implications of receiving organized responses to their accidental transmission. Dr. Kim Hana suggested that they might have made contact with a civilization that was trying to establish formal diplomatic relations. Engineer Choi Dae was more worried that they had accidentally violated some kind of alien communication protocol and were about to be attacked. Medical Officer Bae Sol had been monitoring the psychological profiles of the crew and noticed something interesting in the response signals. The mathematical patterns contained emotional resonance frequencies that indicated the transmitting species were experiencing elevated levels of excitement and hope. This was unusual because most first contact situations produced fear or caution in alien psychology rather than positive emotions. Dr. Shin Woo worked around the clock to decode more of the response signals and made a disturbing discovery. The Geo aliens were not trying to establish diplomatic contact or issue threats about protocol violations. They were sending what appeared to be worship prayers directed toward humanity. The mathematical patterns matched religious ceremony structures from dozens of different alien cultures in the human database. The realization that an unknown alien civilization was apparently worshipping humans based on their accidental transmission created serious concerns among the crew. Commander Lee Jun knew that this situation could have major implications for human-alien relations and possibly for galactic politics. He ordered a complete analysis of what information had been transmitted and how it might have been interpreted by alien minds. Dr. Kim Hana reviewed her research notes that had been part of the scrambled transmission and tried to understand how aliens might interpret human survival behavior. Her data showed that humans would continue fighting against impossible odds long after mathematical analysis indicated certain defeat. To human minds, this was normal behavior, but to aliens who relied heavily on logical probability calculations, it might appear supernatural. Pilot Park Kyung examined his personal flight logs that had been transmitted and realized that his routine navigation procedures might seem impossible to species with different psychology. He regularly made decisions based on intuition and experience rather than computer calculations. His successful flights through dangerous areas were the result of human adaptability and training, but aliens might interpret them as evidence of divine intervention. Engineer Choi Day looked at his technical reports with new understanding of how they might confuse alien engineers. His repair methods often involved creative solutions that violated standard procedures and used equipment in ways the manufacturers never intended. To humans, this was normal problem-solving, but to strictly logical alien minds, it might appear to be miraculous manipulation of physical laws. The response signals continued to grow stronger and more numerous each day. Dr. Xin Wu detected transmission sources from additional star systems and estimated that the number of responding civilizations had grown from 40 to over 100. Whatever message the aliens thought they had received from humanity was spreading rapidly across their communication networks. Communications Officer Yoon Mira finally managed to decode enough of the alien language to understand some of the prayer content. The aliens were referring to humans as the enduring ones and the species that transcends logic, and were asking for guidance in overcoming their own impossible situations. They seemed to believe that humans possessed divine abilities to succeed where normal physics indicated failure. Medical Officer Bae Sol detected unprecedented changes in the alien psychological signatures embedded in the response signals. The transmitting species were showing signs of renewed hope and determination after what appeared to be a very long period of despair and resignation. Something about the human transmission had transformed their mental state from defeat to renewed fighting spirit. Commander Lee Jun realized that humanity had accidentally become the center of an alien religious movement based on misinterpretation of normal human behavior. The situation was growing beyond anything his crew could handle alone, and would soon require intervention from Earth authorities. But first they needed to understand exactly what they had started and how it might affect the future of human civilization in the galaxy. The UES Resilience continued its mission, while the crew struggled to comprehend that their simple refusal to give up had become the foundation of faith for countless alien believers across the stars. 3 months had passed since the accidental transmission, and Captain Han Jae received an emergency message from Earth Command that made his hands shake as he read it. Alien ships from 43 different species were arriving in the Sol system every day, and all of them claimed to be pilgrims seeking the sacred homeworld of what they called the Eternal Strugglers, which apparently meant humanity. Earth's orbital defense systems were overwhelmed by the sheer number of alien vessels requesting permission to approach. Most of the ships contained thousands of alien pilgrims who wanted to visit the planet where the divine humans lived. The aliens were peaceful, but their religious fervor was causing massive disruption to normal space traffic and threatening to expose humanity's location to potentially hostile species. Captain Han Jae immediately contacted Commander Lee Jun on the UES Resilience and explained the crisis that their accidental broadcast had created. The alien faith based on human persistence had spread across dozens of star systems faster than anyone thought possible. Entire civilizations were abandoning their traditional religions and converting to worship of human determination and refusal to accept defeat. On the Veltar homeworld, General Kexandra was leading a revolution in military thinking that was producing impossible results. Her engineers had discovered Engineer Choi Day's technical logs in the transmitted data and were treating them as sacred maintenance prayers. Alien repair crews would chant Choi Day's troubleshooting procedures while working on broken equipment and claimed that following his methods granted them supernatural persistence. The results were undeniable, even though they made no logical sense. Veltar engineers were successfully repairing equipment that had been classified as permanently destroyed for decades. They were combining parts from different systems in ways that violated engineering principles, but somehow produced working devices. The key seemed to be their new willingness to keep trying solutions long after logical analysis indicated they should give up. Military equipment that had been abandoned as unrepairable was being restored to service by engineer teams who refused to accept that anything was truly broken beyond fixing. Veltar factories were producing more equipment than they had in years because workers no longer stopped when they encountered problems that appeared unsolvable. They would work around obstacles and find alternative methods just like the humans. Dr. Kim Hana's survival research had been transformed into something called the Codex of Endurance and was being studied by alien military academies across 17 different star systems. Her documentation of human historical battles where impossible victories occurred was being treated as tactical doctrine rather than academic research. Alien commanders were learning about human strategies and trying to apply them to their own desperate military situations. The effects were transforming alien warfare in ways that neither side had expected. Battles that should have ended in predictable defeats were producing surprise victories when one side applied human-style persistence. Military units were refusing to surrender even when surrounded and outnumbered because they had learned that humans considered such situations to be merely challenging rather than hopeless. Pilot Park Kyung's personal flight logs had become legendary among alien navigators who called them the Sacred Journey Records and studied every detail of his impossible flights. Alien pilots were learning to trust their instincts instead of relying completely on computer calculations, and were discovering that they could survive situations their machines declared fatal. The transformation was spreading beyond military applications into civilian life on dozens of worlds. Alien workers were tackling construction projects that had been abandoned as impossible for generations. Scientists were pursuing research that probability analysis had declared futile. Artists were creating works that violated traditional aesthetic principles, but somehow achieved beauty through sheer determination. Historian Lee Minji aboard the UES Resilience was analyzing reports from Earth about the alien pilgrims and trying to piece together what had happened to create such widespread religious conversion. The aliens' desperation had been so complete that humanity's casual resilience appeared divine to minds that had forgotten what hope felt like. What humans considered normal stubbornness was being interpreted as miraculous intervention by higher powers. The situation was becoming increasingly unstable as traditional alien governments lost control over populations that no longer followed logical decision-making processes. Citizens were making choices based on emotional inspiration rather than careful calculation. They were taking enormous risks and attempting projects that rational analysis declared impossible. But their new faith in human-style persistence was producing unexpected successes. Wars that had raged for centuries were being disrupted as soldiers on both sides began worshipping the same human ideals of never giving up. Enemy forces were sharing Engineer Choi Dae's technical prayers and studying the same human battle tactics. Some conflicts were ending not through victory or defeat, but through mutual conversion to the human faith that declared all problems could be solved through sufficient determination. Communications Officer Yoon Mira was receiving thousands of prayer transmissions every day from alien converts who wanted guidance from their human gods. The aliens were asking for help with everything from personal problems to planetary crises. They believed that humans possessed supernatural wisdom about overcoming impossible obstacles and wanted specific instructions for applying human principles to their own situations. The alien prayers contained detailed descriptions of situations where traditional logic had failed and the aliens were hoping human-style thinking could provide solutions. They wanted to know how humans decided which impossible tasks were worth attempting, and how they maintained hope when mathematics clearly indicated certain failure. The questions revealed how completely different human psychology was from typical alien thought patterns. Dr. Xin Wu was studying the linguistic patterns in the alien prayers and discovered that dozens of different species were developing new languages specifically for communicating with humans. These sacred tongues incorporated human concepts that had no equivalent in traditional alien languages. Words for irrational optimism and stubborn persistence were appearing in cultures that had never needed such terminology before. Medical Officer Baysol detected alarming changes in alien brain chemistry based on psychological signatures in their transmissions. The aliens were artificially stimulating their neural pathways to mimic what they believed were human thought patterns. Some species were using drugs or surgical procedures to make their minds more emotionally driven and less dependent on logical calculation. The most disturbing reports came from aliens who were trying to physically transform themselves to become more human-like. They were altering their reproduction cycles and social structures to copy what they perceived as humanity's divine nature. Some species were abandoning their traditional collective decision-making and adopting individual responsibility models because they believed humans derived their power from personal determination. Engineer Choi Dae was horrified to learn that his technical logs were being treated as religious scripture by millions of alien engineers. His routine troubleshooting procedures had been elevated to the status of holy rituals that aliens believed would grant them access to human-style problem-solving abilities. Equipment repair ceremonies were being conducted in his name across dozens of star systems. Captain Han Jae faced an impossible decision when alien representatives formally requested direct guidance from their human gods. The aliens wanted humanity to provide official religious doctrine and establish formal channels for receiving divine instructions. They could not understand that humans were not actually divine, and that their persistence was learned behavior rather than supernatural ability. The crisis deepened when Earth's xenopsychologists reported that telling the aliens the truth about human nature might destroy the faith that had ended a century of interstellar warfare and brought unprecedented cooperation between hostile species. The human faith had accomplished what diplomacy and military force had failed to achieve for generations, but it was based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what humans actually were. Commander Lee Jun realized that humanity was trapped in an accidental role as galactic gods for civilizations that desperately needed something to believe in. The simple human refusal to give up had become the foundation of a new religion that was transforming alien civilization, but could collapse if the believers learned that their gods were just ordinary people who happened to be very stubborn when facing difficult problems. 6 months into the crisis, xenoanthropologist Oh Kyung led a cultural response team to the Veltar homeworld aboard the diplomatic vessel UES Understanding. She had studied alien societies for 20 years, but nothing had prepared her for what she found when she arrived at the planet that had become the center of the human faith movement. The Veltar homeworld had been transformed into something that defied everything Oh Kyung knew about logical alien civilizations. The species that had once been known for methodical planning and careful calculation were now taking enormous risks and making emotional decisions that their ancestors would have considered insane. Construction projects that had been abandoned for decades were being completed through sheer determination rather than proper engineering. Oh Kyung met with Morthak the Learned, who had become the high priest of human worship among his people. The elderly scientist explained how the accidental transmission had changed everything for the Veltar, who had been slowly dying from despair and resignation. The human example of persistent struggle had given them hope for the first time in generations, and they were willing to do anything to become worthy of their human gods. The results were both miraculous and terrifying. Infrastructure projects that Veltar engineers had declared impossible for decades were being completed by work crews who refused to accept that any task was too difficult. They had learned from engineer Choi Dae's technical logs that humans never gave up on repairing broken equipment, so they applied the same principle to massive construction projects that required resources they did not possess. Oh Kyung toured a water processing facility that should not have been able to function. According to Veltar engineering principles, the alien workers had combined components from 6 different incompatible systems and made them work together through creative modifications that violated every safety protocol. The facility was producing clean water for millions of citizens, but could explode at any moment if the improvised connections failed. The same pattern was repeated across the planet, as Veltar citizens embraced human-style problem-solving, without understanding the knowledge and experience that made such methods work for humans. They were attempting repairs and modifications that required decades of training, but their faith in human persistence convinced them that determination alone was sufficient to overcome any obstacle. Admiral Co. Tae arrived in the Veltar system with a diplomatic fleet and discovered that the situation was far more complex than Earth Command had realized. The alien species that had never met before were forming alliances based on shared worship of human resilience. They were sharing technology freely and cooperating on projects that would have been impossible under their previous logical decision-making systems. The Admiral met with representatives from 7 different alien species who had gathered at the Veltar homeworld for what they called the Great Assembly of Human Faith. These species had been bitter enemies for over a century, but were now working together to build monuments and temples dedicated to human persistence. They believed that their human gods wanted universal cooperation and peace among all intelligent species. Dr. Young Yuki was a philosopher who had been brought specifically to address the theological implications of humanity's accidental divine status. She spent weeks interviewing alien converts and discovered that they were not just copying human behavior, but were trying to fundamentally transform themselves into what they believed humans were like. The changes went far beyond surface modifications and were affecting the core of alien identity. Some species were altering their brain chemistry to reduce logical thinking and increase emotional responses because they believed humans derived their power from feelings rather than calculation. Others were changing their social structures from collective decision-making to individual responsibility because they thought human strength came from personal determination rather than group consensus. The most extreme converts were modifying their reproductive systems to produce offspring that would be more human-like in their thinking patterns. They wanted their children to be born with natural persistence and stubbornness, rather than the logical mindset that had characterized their species for millions of years. The genetic modifications were being performed without proper testing and could have unpredictable consequences for future generations. Dr. Young Yuki realized that the aliens were essentially committing cultural suicide in their desperate attempt to become worthy of human attention. They were abandoning everything that had made their civilizations successful in order to copy behaviors they did not understand from a species they had never actually met. The human faith was destroying alien identity, even as it brought them hope and cooperation. Captain Hanjay faced increasingly difficult decisions as alien delegations requested direct intervention from humanity in their local conflicts and social problems. The aliens believed that their human gods could provide solutions to any difficulty and wanted specific guidance for applying human principles to situations that humans had never encountered. The requests ranged from simple technical problems to complex political crises that had no clear solutions. Alien engineers wanted to know exactly how Engineer Choi Dae would repair their broken infrastructure. Military commanders wanted detailed instructions for applying human battle tactics to their specific strategic situations. Social leaders wanted human wisdom for reforming their governments and cultural institutions. Each response from humanity was treated as divine revelation and became the basis for new religious doctrines that spread rapidly across alien communication networks. Even casual suggestions were elevated to the status of holy commandments that millions of aliens would follow without question. The responsibility of being treated as gods was overwhelming for humans who were just trying to help with practical problems. Communications. Officer Yoon Mira reported that the volume of alien prayers and requests for guidance had grown beyond any possibility of individual response. The UES Resilience was receiving over 10,000 messages per day from alien converts who wanted personal advice from their human gods. The communication systems were being overwhelmed by the sheer number of aliens seeking divine guidance. Medical Officer Bae Sol detected dangerous psychological changes in alien populations that were trying too hard to emulate human thinking patterns. Some species were experiencing massive increases in mental illness as individuals struggled to suppress their natural logical processes in favor of emotional decision-making. Others were developing addiction problems from drugs used to simulate human-style brain chemistry. The most serious cases involved aliens who had become completely dependent on human guidance for every decision in their lives. They had lost the ability to think independently and would not take any action without first consulting their human gods for approval. Entire civilizations were becoming paralyzed, waiting for divine instructions that humanity could not possibly provide for billions of individual situations. Engineer Choi Dae was disturbed to learn that his technical documentation had become the foundation for dangerous industrial practices across dozens of alien worlds. Species that lacked human intuition and experience were attempting complex repairs and modifications that required skills they did not possess. The failure rate was extremely high and had already caused several major accidents that killed thousands of alien workers. The situation reached a critical point when alien representatives formally requested that humanity establish a permanent religious authority to govern the human faith movement. They wanted official priests and temples and systematic doctrine that would provide guidance for every aspect of alien life. The aliens could not understand that humans were not actually divine and did not want to be worshipped by other species. Dr. Young Yuki realized that humanity was facing an impossible choice between maintaining the beneficial effects of the human faith and preventing the destruction of alien civilizations through misguided worship. The faith had ended wars and brought cooperation, but was also causing aliens to lose their own cultural identity and make dangerous decisions based on misunderstood human examples. The crisis deepened when some alien species began to suspect that humanity was not actually divine and started demanding proof of supernatural abilities. Other species became more fanatical in their worship and declared that any doubt about human divinity was blasphemy that should be punished. The human faith movement was beginning to split into competing factions that could restart the wars it had originally ended. Oh Kyung submitted her final report to Earth Command with the recommendation that humanity needed to find a way to transform the alien faith into something healthier without destroying the hope and cooperation it had created. The challenge was teaching aliens that human persistence was a learned skill rather than divine magic, while maintaining their belief that determination could overcome impossible obstacles. 1 year after the accidental transmission, communications officer Yoon Mira sat at her station aboard the UES Resilience and prepared to broadcast the most important message in galactic history. Working with philosopher Dr. Young Yuki and the original crew, she had spent months crafting words that could transform humanity from gods into teachers, without destroying the faith that had brought peace to countless worlds. The message would be transmitted simultaneously across all 17 alien communication frequencies that had received the original accidental broadcast. Every alien civilization that had converted to the human faith would receive the same explanation at the same time. There would be no opportunity for the message to be corrupted or misinterpreted as it spread through alien communication networks. Dr. Young Yuki had worked with xenopsychologists and linguistic experts to create a message that would reframe humanity's role in galactic civilization. Instead of divine gods who possessed supernatural abilities, humans would be presented as elder siblings in the long journey toward mastering persistence and determination. The message emphasized that human resilience was learned through thousands of years of struggle and failure and eventual triumph. The broadcast began with communications officer Yoon Mira explaining that the original transmission had been an accident caused by equipment malfunction rather than a deliberate message from divine beings. She acknowledged that humans possessed unusual persistence compared to most alien species, but explained that this trait had developed through evolutionary pressure and cultural learning rather than supernatural intervention. Commander Lee Jun spoke next and described how human civilization had faced countless disasters and defeats throughout their history, but had always found ways to survive and eventually prosper. He explained that human persistence was not magic, but was the result of accumulated wisdom passed down through generations of people who had refused to give up when facing impossible situations. Dr. Kim Hana presented her research on human psychology and explained that determination and stubborn refusal to accept defeat were skills that could be learned and improved through practice. She described how human children were taught from an early age that failure was temporary and that success came from trying multiple approaches until something worked. These lessons created mental habits that allowed humans to continue fighting when logic suggested they should surrender. Engineer Choi Dae addressed the millions of alien engineers who had been treating his technical logs as religious scripture. He explained that his repair methods were based on decades of training and experience, rather than divine inspiration. He emphasized that creative problem-solving required both determination and knowledge, and that aliens could learn the same skills through education and practice, rather than faith alone. Pilot Park Kyung spoke to alien navigators who had been studying his flight logs as sacred texts. He described how human pilots learned to balance computer calculations with intuitive judgment through years of training and simulation. He explained that successful navigation through dangerous situations required both persistence and skill, and that aliens could develop the same abilities through proper education. The message introduced a new concept that Dr. Young Yuki called the way of earned strength, which would replace the worship of human divinity with a philosophy of gradual skill development. This approach acknowledged that persistence and determination were valuable traits, while emphasizing that they could be learned by any species willing to invest the time and effort required for proper training. Engineer Ko Min had been working with alien technical teams to establish the first human-alien technical exchange program. Instead of treating human repair methods as magical rituals, aliens would learn the scientific principles and practical skills that made creative problem-solving possible. The program would combine human determination with alien logical thinking to produce better results than either approach could achieve alone. The technical exchange centers would be established on dozens of alien worlds and would teach practical skills rather than religious doctrine. Alien engineers would learn how to balance persistence with safety and how to apply creative thinking without abandoning proper procedures. Human instructors would work alongside alien teachers to develop training programs suited to different species psychology. Dr. Xin Wu helped establish persistence academies across Veltar space, where alien students could learn to combine their natural logical abilities with trained determination. The curriculum was based on human history, but presented as case studies in problem-solving rather than religious scripture. Students would study human victories and defeats to understand how persistence could be applied effectively to different situations. The academies taught that persistence without knowledge was dangerous, while knowledge without persistence led to premature surrender when facing difficult challenges. Students learned to evaluate situations carefully before deciding whether continued effort was likely to produce success or would only result in unnecessary harm. This balanced approach prevented the reckless behavior that had caused accidents in alien civilizations trying to copy human methods. Medical officer Bay Sol worked with alien psychologists to develop mental health programs for species that had damaged themselves trying to artificially copy human thinking patterns. The programs helped aliens understand that they did not need to abandon their natural psychology to benefit from human examples. Different species could develop persistence in ways that suited their own mental structures. The rehabilitation programs were especially important for aliens who had become completely dependent on human guidance for every decision. These individuals needed to relearn confidence in their own judgment while maintaining the valuable lesson that determination could help them overcome difficult obstacles. The process was slow but essential for restoring healthy alien independence. Admiral Seo Tai coordinated the diplomatic efforts to transform alien religious movements into educational institutions. Former temples dedicated to human worship became schools where aliens could learn practical skills for applying persistence to real-world problems. Religious ceremonies were replaced with graduation celebrations for students who had mastered new abilities. The transformation was not without resistance, as some alien groups insisted that humans were truly divine, and that the new message was a test of faith rather than genuine explanation. These fanatic believers refused to accept that human abilities could be learned and continued worshiping humans as gods. However, most alien converts embraced the opportunity to earn their own strength, rather than relying on divine intervention. Captain Han Jae supervised the gradual reduction of alien pilgrimage to Earth, as the focus shifted from worship to education. Instead of seeking divine guidance, aliens began requesting human teachers and technical experts who could help them develop their own persistence and problem-solving abilities. The relationship between humans and aliens evolved from worship to mutual cooperation. Dr. Jung Yuki established the Galactic Philosophy Institute to study how different species could learn from each other while maintaining their own cultural identity. The institute promoted the idea that every species had valuable traits that could benefit others, and that cooperation was more productive than worship. Humans could teach persistence while aliens could share their logical thinking and specialized knowledge. The second expedition from Earth launched with Commander Li Jun, leading a mixed crew that included alien members who had graduated from the Persistence Academies. These aliens had learned to balance determination with their natural logical abilities, and could work effectively alongside human crew members. The cooperation produced better results than either species could achieve alone. 5 years after the accidental transmission, the former war zones had been transformed into cooperative research centers where multiple alien species worked together on projects that benefited everyone. The human faith had evolved into something greater than worship or simple copying of human behavior. It had become a galactic philosophy that combined the best traits of many different species. Engineer Choi Day received reports from alien worlds, where infrastructure projects were being completed safely and efficiently, using methods that combined human persistence with alien precision. The reckless copying of human techniques had been replaced with careful adaptation that suited each species' capabilities. Aliens were achieving their own impossible victories through earned skill rather than faith alone. The accidental faith had become an intentional partnership between species that recognized each other's value while working toward common goals. Humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization was not their technology or knowledge, but their example that determination and refusal to accept defeat could be learned by anyone willing to make the effort to develop these crucial abilities.